while since we've done one of these, and it's a series that honestly I still had a little bit of work to do on, and I never quite finished. So today we're gonna be taking a look back at that. We're gonna be continuing up this series, and if you guys wanna see more so, of course, we'll keep it going until we are up to date. But that said, the series in which we've taken a look at previous titles in Call of Duty in 2018 seems to be one you guys quite enjoy, so I figured why not let's go back to one that is very controversial. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but it is a game that in its prime, a lot of people either loved or hated the game, and since then, it's kind of one of those things where we can take a look at it now that all the dust has settled, and of course now years later, is it still the same thing that we remember? Is it still something that we either loved or hated as much as we did? But today we're gonna be taking a look at Call of Duty Ghosts in 2018. We're gonna be taking a look as the same format as the other videos that we've done, in which we take a look at a large number of different things, but it is one that we're gonna go in a little retrospective look and take a look at Ghosts, what it is now, and if it is the same thing that we remember from ages ago. But that said, let's jump right into it. Admittedly, Ghosts wasn't in the time one of my favorite titles. Looking back, was I a little too harsh on it? Maybe did I not give it enough of a chance? Maybe that's the case, but it is something that looking back, that now affords us to be a little bit more unbiased, a little bit more out of the moment, and therefore we can take a little bit more of a reasonable approach to everything. So looking back at it, it is something in which we have, of course, a lot of staples within the Call of Duty franchise, but we had a lot of great things within the game, including some of the weapons. The MTAR itself, the Honey Badger, the Vector, the Remington, those of course were some of the greatest and still are if you end up playing them within Ghosts in 2018. Those weapons that really haven't been touched in terms of tuning, they're still the fan favorites, the meta if you want to put it that way, though a lot of the times that I played earlier in the day, whenever I was capturing footage, not a lot of people necessarily gravitated towards them, but it is something that you'd still see them, though I will say I played a lot of what felt like bots, but I digress. In terms of maps, well, we had of course a large portion of maps on offer at launch of the game back then. We since still have seen a lot of DLC introduced. There was 14, 15 if you count Freefall, which I think was a season pass exclusive back in the day, but that's something in which the maps of course don't necessarily change. Those are static. Those are things that throughout the content lifecycle of Ghost did get added, but nothing's really been changed since then. There's not been any major adjustments, but there are maps that are quite great. Maps like Octane, Freight, Warhawk, Strike Zone, and of course everybody's fan favorite, Stonehaven. But jokes aside, there were a couple of maps that really did stand out in the sense that if you do go back and were prompted to end up having to name off a few maps, those are some that probably are a little bit more iconic. Some maps that, even bias aside, do actually turn out to be great maps within the franchise. Game modes, well, we have a ton of them, or at least in the prime we did, to choose from. Game modes like Cranked, Blitz, Reinforced, Search and Rescue, Drop Zone Returned. Those other ones, though, were all introduced within Ghost, and though many did not return, there were a lot of fun memories to be had here with this. Cranked, being that one that was actually created so that people would stop camping, was such a fun little mechanic involved with it, where if you didn't get a kill in X amount of time, I believe it was 20 seconds, you ended up blowing up. So it was just a race to see who could chain together the most kills, and a very rush-happy game mode. It was a ton of fun, and definitely one that if you played around with it, you probably enjoyed, or maybe you didn't, but it was worth giving a go. Game modes like Search and Rescue have returned in-game files and in-game codes, and in some slight versions within Call of Duty's following, but it was one that added a different dynamic at the time. Search and Destroy with kill confirmed, adding a little bit more tactical play, but also still having the ability to keep that one and done mentality along with it. Drop Zone, of course, being a fan favorite that everybody seemingly loved. That was a great addition, and a lot of chaotic gameplay came out of that. The only downside with a lot of these now in 2018 is that if you were to go and jump into a lot of them, chances are you might not find a lobby, simply because player numbers are dwindling not only in the game overall, but in those modes in particular. You start to see the ones that are gravitating more so towards the popular modes like Team Deathmatch and Domination. That's something that of course has to be taken into consideration if you want to go back and play. From a top-down perspective, Ghosts also offered a unique way in which we had to level up our operators as well. The ranking system was a little bit different. You started with a new soldier every new prestige, so Prestige 10 granted you the completion of 10 different soldiers that you could play, and once you reach max level, it didn't really matter, but if you played around with ones you already completed, it really didn't help out your rank in any sense. So you kind of had the option to rank up if you wanted to, but it was something that, again, it was something that was a new perspective on the ranking system that we had seen for years previously leading up to Ghost, and then once we saw it with Ghost, it was a little bit of a curveball. So it was cool to see. I don't know if that is one of my preferred ranking systems, but it was interesting to see that change up nonetheless. In terms of other things, well, honestly, I think think one thing to mention is that Ghost had some of the best camos, I think. Infinity Ward, I think, in my mind, do a great job at doing some of the camos. Infinite Warfare, in particular, also had some awesome camos. But that said, unfortunately, what you're watching in the background is gameplay from the Xbox One, and I played primarily all of Call of Duty Ghosts on the Xbox 360, so camos like the Spectrum camo, that fabled camo that was so rare, and a lot of other ones that I had, didn't really ever transfer on because they were more so microtransactions that even whenever back in the day, Activision said, sorry, we can't really transfer that over when I talk to support, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, that was lost and I'd have to re-download or rebuy all of them. But if you take a look at what was on offer, there were some really sweet camos, and even some that aren't even listed in the camos themselves or that are buyable because of some things with, say, like the season pass, and I think another couple of other smaller things that really never got advertised and were kind of limited edition things, but still very cool nonetheless. Another awesome thing though that we had on offer in Ghost was that of the score streak systems. We had the lethal, support, and specialist, with the specialist changed out a little bit because each had their own squad point designation for not only unlocks but also what you had to end up using in terms of actually equipping them. So you kind of had a little pick 10 system within that essentially, in which you had to match everything up. So it was a very cool way in how that was done. Extinction also then was absolutely fantastic. That was something I played a ton of, though it may not compare to, say, a lot of things within, say, Treyarch Zombies. It was awesome to play at the time, and it was really cool, I think, to see that come back within Infinite Warfare as well as a little, not Easter egg, but also tie-in with the zombie storyline within that game. But what's Call of Duty Ghost like now, almost 5 years later? What is it like today if you were to jump on? Well, the biggest thing that I think you'll come in contact with is that of the hurdles of the player count. When I was playing earlier today, and it was right around peak time, I believe it was around, say, 850, maybe jumping up to 1,000 players online. Now again, as of the last few years in terms of how they did player count, it was kind of weird in which maybe this was just Xbox One, maybe this was worldwide on all platforms, but regardless, it was something that does not matter. The numbers were definitely dwindling. If you take a look back at some of the other Call of Duty titles, say Modern Warfare 3, Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2, those of course have a little bit higher player numbers, and that might just be because they were more popular titles. However, that will go and affect your connectivity within lobbies, making it a little bit harder to find lobbies, and if you end up even connecting to people, you'll end up having higher pings, and of course that just creates unfavorable matchmaking terms then. But is it impossible to find a lobby? Absolutely not. I jumped in, didn't take all that long to find a match on my connection, even with a strict NAT type by the time I got into a game like the snap of a finger. And in terms of lobbies, well, that's one thing that I think it's also really important to mention as well. It seems like a very big mix, but not all that much in the sense of the middle ground. What I saw was a couple of max levels like myself. That was something that, coming back to it, I still retained that rank, but there also were a lot of lower ranked players in my lobbies also. So that's something that, again, I saw a lot of the kind of higher end and the lower end. I didn't really see all that much in the middle ground, but maybe that's just luck or randomosity of how this ends up working out. But again, in terms of connections, coming back to that a little bit, in-game, it didn't seem all that bad. Of course, the biggest thing with Ghost in my book back in the day was that of the hit detection, the dying around corners, the first to shoot, first to die mentality. That stuff still is present, and I think that that was one of the biggest offenders of the game. I don't know if that's just me, but that was one of the things that I always fought with back in the day. It still is there, but it is something that, coming back to it, I don't know if I really ever needed to be all that harsh on it. It doesn't seem as bad as I remember it back in the day, but maybe that's just me. One thing that I honestly loved coming back and playing around with a little bit was that of the field orders within Call of Duty Ghosts. That was another introduction that we didn't talk about when recapping the features, but it was something that was a lot of fun, and in some cases gave you a bit of a streak that you might not have deserved in a sense. I know a lot of people back in the day got really upset that the chem strike was actually available out of the care packages in those field orders on certain maps, but it is something that was there. It is what it is, but a lot of the times you'll just get a regular streak out of it. But it was fun and encouraged a different way to play the game than you may normally end up doing so, and still my favorite to this day is Humiliate Another Player, in which it brought the classic teabag into actual multiplayer and getting rewarded for it. But regardless, that was something fun to play around with in 2018. Again, if you guys forgot about that little system, it is fun to go back and play around a little bit with it. Now, the final two things that I want to leave you guys with in terms of what this is like is still, to me, I think the two biggest things that are irritating out of this in terms of the gameplay itself. Number one being that you're still going to have a ton of kick when being shot. This is something that, if you guys remember, grip was pretty much a crucial portion of a class setup, because if you didn't have it, well then you'd end up shooting at a player, and if you're both shooting at each other, chances are your aim would kick up wildly during that gunfight, and a lot of the times it would cause you to miss 2, 3, maybe even 4 shots depending on how high it kicked you up. But that in turn almost would always be the kiss of death. So therefore it was something that really hurt the players in a sense, but it was something that we had to deal with. That's still, of course, there still has not been any sort of nerf or tuning to the flinch itself within Ghost, and I don't think there ever will be again because, well, the game's 5 years old and counting, so it's certainly not the main priority of Infinity Ward, and I don't expect it to be. And another thing that will persist and has always persisted, but I was kind of like, man, why are you doing this on a 5-year-old game, is the amount of campers. You're going to run into a lot of people sitting in corners, whether that be simply because they're just trying to patiently wait it out, they're trying to play the game on a slower scale, and it's a player that may not be necessarily as much a seasoned veteran as you and I, so therefore it's just their way of playing like that. Whatever it may be, there are a lot of campers from the gameplay that I ended up getting a little bit earlier in the day and playing around for a few hours within that, but nonetheless, that's gonna happen at any point. But when it comes down to it, is Call of Duty Ghosts as bad as we remember it? Personally, I don't think so. I had some fun playing around with it. I was extremely critical and very harsh on the game back in the day, but it is something that, looking back, it's just a fun little chill out game now when I go back. Now, of course, there's not all that stress of it being the main game and you have to really try and rank up in that sense, in which you can go back and just let go of whatever you're looking for in a game, just play. That's always fun and always helps the case, but it was one that I did go back and I had some fun with, and maybe you guys will as well. If you do, again, expect low player counts, but lobbies should be relatively okay depending on the time and the region you're in. I again had no issues, but that's also probably because I played at a peak time, and I also live in a quite populated area in terms of servers, so maybe that's one of the helping factors that made this easier to bear. But it is something that, if you guys have the opportunity to, definitely go check it out, play again for a little bit, even if it's just for a few matches. It might give you some perspective on where we've come actually since that time, so quite cool to take a look at. But that's where we're gonna wrap it up, so let me know your thoughts down there in the comment section down below. Did you guys like, love, hate, dislike, whatever it may be, Call of Duty Ghosts back in the day? And if you've played it recently, what are your thoughts now from 2013 to now? Love to get your thoughts and feedback. But if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure you drop a like down below, and of course, if you guys are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding Call of Duty. And if you guys want to see the continuation of this series, we still have another couple of titles left in the franchise till we get up to date. If you guys want to see this continue, feel free to let me know, and of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single thing. But also, if you guys want to follow me over on Twitter, that's the best place to get connected outside of YouTube. Practically live on Twitter, so if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, link is down there in the description below. And if you guys also want to follow me over on Instagram, getting a little bit more active over there as well, so that link is also in the description. But all that said and out of the way, hope you guys have a fantastic day. Thank you all so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. Take care, and peace.